Hey there. With Lucy and Julian on the verge of releasing their next studio albums, Julian a collaborative one with Taurus that is, I think it's a pretty good time to talk about all of Boygenius' output so far. Boygenius I think are such a fun combination of artists to talk about because all of these are some of the best songwriters working to date, each in a different way. And also, this isn't just me ranking 10 albums by one artist, but 3 different ones and all of them combined in 2 instances, which is why I would consider almost all of these essential listens. And actually, I would say all of these albums are at least good, with about half of them being arguably great albums. So yeah. Also, if you're wondering, I'm only including the solo albums by these artists plus the Boygenius ones, so no Better Living Community Center and no Forester or Star Killers, though I think both of these albums are memorable at times. So yeah, let's get started.
I don't wanna be funny anymore.
As the debut of Lucy, who I would consider probably the tamest of all of them in this moment in time, this is more rock-centric than you might expect. Guitars are so great. They are bluesy and thick, and they kind of remind me of Sheryl Crow's self-titled album. They're loud and a good gateway to get lost in Lucy's deep melancholic voice, singing songs about empowerment but also just personal experiences. I Don't Wanna Be Funny Anymore is one of the best songs she has ever written, and Troublemaker Doppelganger is a pretty good blues rock track. Compared to all the other albums, however, this one suffers as the product of not coming from a fully formed artist, understand the purpose of the work, showing different aspects of her songwriting that she learned to combine better in the future. And No Burden in that is not a bad album. In fact, I enjoyed it quite a bit. But I think it's the least important album in any of the boys' discographies, which is why I think putting it in last place is not really a hot take at all.
Being back here makes me hot in the face. Hot blood in my pulsing veins. Heavy memories weighing on the crowded.
Well, this one is though. Well, we're gonna talk about the album that probably most people would consider the ultimate COVID record later. I think just in the sound of it, this is the one that sounds the most like it was made during COVID, which it was. However, that change of style comes less from the limited resources that pandemic brought, and one of the songs even has 16 people on it, including the other 2 boys and Mitski, which is a welcome surprise in paper, but none of them really do much here. The intimate sound stems rather from Lucy's attempt at finding the perfect way to bring songs as close to a listener as possible. Christine is the perfect storm of that idea come together with her abilities as a songwriter, which makes for my favorite song of the album. I think it shows the sincerity with which Lucy treats the listener as an equal and doesn't come across as knowing more or being more of a real person than the one she's singing about. However, while Lucy's voice is perfect for that kind of storytelling, for faster moments like the indie pop sound with no guitars around her, it seems too cumbersome to go with the pace these songs have. And I also have a trouble connecting with most of the rest of the album. So sorry Lucy, guess I never knew you like I thought I did. Turn the Lights is the second album of Julian Baker, and compared to Sprained Ankle, the most noticeable difference is in production value. Like the opener Over fading into Appointments. Beautiful. The biggest strength of the album must be in scale though. It makes the whole thing a captivating experience. And some of the tracks hit on the emotional punch that not many other artists are able to pull off. Most notably on Appointments, Shadowboxing or Claws in Your Back, which deals as an answer to the track Go Home on the debut. With this atmosphere, the album brings you in a place that makes it hard to escape, but which is also a reason why I don't really return to it very often. The biggest problem I have with the album though is in its lack of variety. I know from my own experience that the worst thing you could say to a singer-songwriter record is that it all sounds the same. But honestly, if there was any record where I couldn't really say anything against that claim, this would probably be the one. So although the album as a project has its own style and most of the songs are pretty good, when you listen to the album start to finish, you realize that after the first few tracks, it doesn't really have much new to offer. The fact that I think some surface level Boygenius fans don't really get is how much these guys are into rock music. We've had Lucy's first album, and we'll talk about the second one later, but Julian especially. When she was on Touche Amore's last album, she played in a blues rock band before her first solo album, she toured with Turnstile, and all of these people are fans of Me Without You. So it isn't a surprise that at some point her music had to become livelier. And does it happen here? Sort of. Look, in the moments when the album does just commit to being more open and colorful in its arrangements, it's beautiful. Like, Faith Healer is a peak moment in JB's discography. And even when the songs are more intimate, they seem to progress beautifully. My favorite of that kind is Favor, which grabs your attention as hard it hardly leaves you any air to breathe. But at times, there seems to be something holding the album back from realizing its full vision. Like Bloodshot, which when played live is this energetic anthem, while on the album you can barely hear the guitars. I hope for her next solo project, Julian is able to let loose more, as this, the record, and her latest singles with Torres should have shown her that her fanbase can endure a change of musical style if genuine. In some ways, I think the success of her first album had a limiting effect on Julian, and not allowing her to excel in all of her musical passions. Is part of why I'm never really quite sure how to feel about Turn On The Lights. Because although all these songs feel genuine, I'm never really quite sure how much the desire to write songs in this style was really there, more than writing other songs. I think Little Oblivions is a turning point in Julian's discography and the first step out of the expectations and towards flourishing in what she wants to release in the future. It's quite remarkable how Phoebe Bridgers just burst onto the scene. Different from Lucy, who needed a whole LP to find her own voice, and Julian, who's still coping with her own talent, Phoebe just came out with her first EP, knowing exactly what she wants to do and how to do it. Part of that surely comes from her not releasing it independently, which obviously gave her more resources than the others had, but also just working with the same people on her previous two EPs, which also gave her quite some time to explore her vision. Literally from the first seconds on Smoke Signals, you can hear this is something special. The bass line and the chorus is great, the song is so hazy yet so present. It's amazing. Georgia and Chelsea, which were on both of her EPs, did have more enjoyable versions there, but I guess the U2 meets country rock version of Chelsea wouldn't have fitted the vibe, so this is fine. Besides, both of these, and I would also throw Funeral in there, are such good songs and just the fundamentals of songwriting. They don't really need much to happen around them, and all that is happening is just setting the scene for the songs to work as well as possible and creating an atmosphere that you can't really escape at any point. Plus, there are multiple moments where you can see the influence Elliott Smith has on Phoebe's work. The chord change in the second chorus of Demi Moore is the one that comes to mind first. And I think there's no way not to mention Motion Sickness, which is as sick as its title. I generally think Phoebe's ability to write songs in both of this folk style but also hits like this is the big reason to her popularity and what makes her as special as a songwriter as she is. The only thing negative I would say about Stranger in the Alps is that it's quite front heavy. But other than that, this is a great album which I gladly recommend. When you remember where this went in my 2023 best albums list, you get a little perspective of the quality these guys are up to. I don't really have much to add to what I said back then. I think the tracklist is quite versatile. Then a Cone is a song that has me flabbergasted at how Lucy can write songs without a hook or even a melody really, that still owns my attention to an amazing extent. And the album overall has more easily enjoyable tracks than I think any other Boygenius project. If I had to make out the weakness though, I'd say some of Phoebe's songs are pretty predictable. And although that works pretty well for something like Letter to an Old Poet, which is literally the part 2 to songs she already wrote, I think for Revolution Zero or Emily I'm Sorry, I felt like I was listening to a Punisher B-Sides album. Julian's songs are all perfect though, she's the best, and for as big of a challenge as living up to the hype this team up obviously produced, I think they did a pretty good job. When I've been telling you about the way how Lucy's other 2 albums don't really get it right to find the environment her voice excels in, then that is because I heard how that sounds. Like No Burden, the instrumentation is again typical for your standard rock bands, but the songs seem less like from a rock band, but from a solo artist, which they are. Because its different elements are just rotating around Lucy like planets around the sun. In that way, these songs are written more around themes than around a riff. Take the opener and their biggest hit, Night Shift, for instance. The song starts with just Lucy over an acoustic guitar expressing her frustration about the situation she finds herself in with a partner or ex-partner. In the second half, the distorted guitars come in as Lucy keeps on repeating ever more intensely the phrases, "You've got 9 to 5, so I'll take the night shift. And I'll never see you again if I can help it. In 5 years, I hope the songs feel like covers dedicated to new lovers." This is brilliant. What makes the album as special as it is are fundamentally these moments. The climaxes the songs are building up towards that hits that sweet spot. That is only possible though because of the way these songs are written around these moments. Like Addictions, which has this ascending guitar passage finding its destination right when the last chorus hits. Or The Shell, which has good lyrics to accompany it, plus the way that the lead guitar comes out of nowhere emulates a visualization of 2 objects, namely the band and the lead guitar, moving towards each other and one of them completely bursting through the other one. My favorite though has to be Yours and Mine. Sound of the band is great as always. The frequently repeated lyrics are almost psalm-like in the calming nature of conveying a seemingly higher knowledge. The part of "we got a long way to go before we get home, because this ain't my home anymore" in particular, has this intense theme of growing up, can't help but feel nostalgic for, while also being deeply moved by it at the same time. And then Solo has to be one of my favorites of the 2010s. For me, Sunfighter is then the better version of Troublemaker Doppelganger in being a beautiful, loose, rock-ish tune with headbang quality, besides just the sound is again so sweet. And in the end then, His Turn is without doubt Lucy's best work. Combines her ability to write deeply touching lyrics and even more badass guitar and more creative band arrangements than her debut, which in the process leads to the crafting of more ambitious songs, able to shake you emotionally while also letting your heart bang. I feel like it is hugely unfair to rank this in comparison to albums, but damn! This EP is borderline perfect. Bite the Hand is about toxic fans who they can never really give what they want. It's sort of their stand in a way. Me and My Dog might just be the best song of 2018. Souvenir has quality that Kafka once described as I have the true feeling of myself only when I'm invariably unhappy. Same goes for Stay Down. Salt in the Ruin sounds almost apocalyptic with its screaming guitars, and the mostly a cappella Catch Up ID has some beautiful harmonies. Besides all of that, of course we knew that all of these are pretty good songwriters and pretty talented people, but it's how they work together that makes it even more special. The arpeggios on Bite the Hands combine those typical Baker arpeggios and the stereotypical slides with the strumming of Lucy's songs. Plus, these songs sound so good. They sound like visions from a distant memory, like the echo of a nice melody you've heard in a dream but that you can't really remember to its full extent. Each of these songs has a special place in my heart, and this EP, although just 6 songs long, is the centerpiece holding this whole list together and making the latest success possible. Well, here we are. I can surely say that as much as no other Boygenius record, this one is deeply connected to its reception. I feel like with it coming out the first summer of COVID, during the time of the internet, it was meant to become the go-to album for sad girl music. I was quite frankly not around during the time, at least not in the discourse, but looking at it from the benefit of hindsight, back in the 2000s, after Is This It, everyone wanted to have their own Strokes, and every indie band had something about the music that reminded one of them, to the point where you could hear the Strokes style without ever listening to them 10 years after their debut album. And 20 years later, the same thing happened to Punisher. And no, I think that is because it is a pretty good album. Let's start with the sounds. While Stranger in the Alps went more for the childhood memory of the Midwest vibe, Punisher is more of like an experiencing the stark clear night in a very uninhabited area that can switch between the beauty of it and the nightmarish realization that anything could be creeping up to you. Or maybe that's just a cover. Starting with Garden Song. The guitars, the echoed out textures, the super bass voice in the chorus, all of these emulate a stream around something that at its core is stationary, like water or the flickering of flame at the campfire. Talking about Garden Song, every song here is great, and I'll tell you why. Garden Song, except for sounding pretty cozy, has a seemingly unstructured banter, resulting in a beautiful conclusion that fills me with joy. Chinese Satellite captures the part of the beauty I mentioned earlier. Kyoto is jam, plus there are 100 things happening in the background, each of which is great. Savior Complex just about gets away with having to give writing credit to Elliott Smith by again just being so well done that I don't really care. The part where the violin fakes a fade out just to turn victorious with the rest of the ensemble for the final is one of my favorite moments on any of her songs. But I have not even begun to talk about the lyrics. On first listen, you might find Phoebe's songs to not really make sense, but that's largely because of how she tells these stories. She doesn't bother explaining the things around it, but just describes the scenes taking place as closely as possible, so you have to keep up with what is going on. At that point though, the lyrics read almost like the script to a scene you can see playing out in your head, and that needs its time to leave you again once the song is over. Which brings us to Moon Song, the slowest song on the whole album, which seems to reach ever new emotional heights with every line in song. Graceland 2 features Julian and Lucy on the backing vocals, as all of these had a song on their next project after the Boygenius EP, which featured the 2 other on backing vocals. For Julian, by the way, that was Favor on Little Oblivions. And then I Know the End is the final the album deserves. I'm not quite sure what the legacy of this album is gonna be, but for me personally, it is an absolute borderline perfect album that has a shout for being the album of this decade.
Marathon runner, my goals are spread.
There's literally no measure by which Julian's debut album, Sprained Ankle, is objectively better than Punisher. I mean, Punisher has multiple songs that, if you look into each of them, probably cost around 5 or 6 digit number. Julian recorded the piano for this album in a room that just happened to have a piano and be free. Phoebe got an orchestra, Julian got one guitar and a drum on just 2 songs. And yet, it's perfect. Again, like with Punisher, I could say something about every song here and why I like it, but it goes deeper than that. Through all the reverb arpeggios, there is a soul in this album that translates so hard through the music. I got the feeling like I knew the person behind it, at a level I don't feel comfortable showing on the internet. There's no real facade to hide behind, and no reason either, as she probably didn't think many people would listen to it. And the lyrics have such a poetic quality, I could spend hours dissecting them. As much as no other album, this one feels like something able to give me the feeling of a real person, understanding oneself on a deeper level, and it is the one thing to help me get over emotionally hard times when I'm in them. Since I first listened to Sprained Ankle, it never really felt like consuming a piece of art, but more like spending time with a person that's able to read the words from my lips I never even knew I wanted to say, and for which own problems I can't help but feel empathetically about. Sprained Ankle might not be the most polished or versatile album in any of their discographies, but it's probably the most human album I've ever heard, and my favorite Boygenius related record. Hey, thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. I have a very small channel, so every subscription would mean the world to me. Listen to my music on Spotify, you can find that under the name Arne Mente. And yeah, listen to music.